Chapter 19. The Clash of Two Minds. One has to become acclimated to rapidly changing situations when associated with the world's greatest detective. While I accompanied Holmes down the dark corridor outside our former cell, my brain spinning like a child's top, I was able to retain a grip on reality by virtue of the fact that positions had been switched in a similar manner in past cases as well. Only a few moments before, we had been the imprisoned ones, and now it seemed we were cast in the role of the stalkers. Holmes had kept the lamp, and its illumination guided us to a flight of stairs leading downward. Nowhere were there light fixtures or furnishings, and the building was but a deserted shell that housed the apparatus of Chu-San-Fu. "What exactly are we doing, Holmes?" I queried in a soft whisper, not only inspired by a desire for secrecy, but by our stark surroundings as well. "Searching for confirmation. Since a metal worker requires heat, I feel that will be available in the furnace area of this extensive ruin." Holmes did not elaborate on this thought, and as we progressed downwards, our ears attuned to any sound, it hardly seemed time to badger him. The myriad questions that fluttered through my mind like aimless butterflies could remain unanswered for the moment. My principal concern was some means of removing ourselves from the crumbling walls of masonry that surrounded us, producing much the same depressing sensation that I had suffered through within the Great Pyramid. Shadow Shady must have been following in our wake, though no signal or sound served as a clue to his presence. It occurred to me that if this ruin was teeming with the followers of the Oriental master criminal, we were marching round in a most free and open manner. As though to confirm this thought, when we rounded a corner leading to the second landing, Holmes and I found ourselves face to face with a pair of villainous-looking Arabians. Holmes immediately began speaking, quite loudly, in the fluent German that, along with other languages, he had mastered during his boyhood travels on the Continent. "These words are for your ears, Shady. We are facing two more Arabs, no doubt looking for the other two in the cell. Delay them by all means, old chap." With a half gesture, Holmes acknowledged the presence of the Arabs who were gazing at us in surprise, and then shouldered past them, leading me by the elbow. I noted one of the Arabians shrug at the other, and then they continued up the stairs we had just vacated. As they disappeared, I let out a deep sigh. "By what, by all that is holy, did you do, Holmes? Hypnotize them?" "Merely assume that this is a multilingual establishment, Watson. A potpourri of dissidents, opportunists, and mercenaries of crime, not all known to each other. Those Arabs are looking for our two guards, who have not returned, and I instructed Sherlock to dispose of them. Rather imagine he will. Seems like an efficient chap, though he was critical of your methods, Holmes." "We shall not take umbrage at Mr. Shady's manner, Watson. After all, he can walk up walls and did so in our behalf. There were now sounds previously inaudible in this rambling wreck of a place. They were not distinguishable, but merely joined forces with the feel of people present somewhere. One in particular remained constant, and it was towards this that Holmes directed our footsteps. Internal combustion engine of some sort, Watson. From the narrow stairwell and the lack of traffic, I would say we are descending the back stairs, which should lead to the area that we seek. It did so somewhat faster than I anticipated, though we did not encounter any more stray members of the criminal conspiracy that we were in the middle of, and unarmed at that, with the thought that Shady might be occupied elsewhere with the disposal of the two ruffians we had met on the stairs. I felt the lack of a backup person in this mad adventure. I was casting a worried glance over my shoulder when I felt Holmes tense at my side. In front of us loomed a door, and there was a definite indication of light on the far side. Holmes extinguished the lamp that had guided us, and we made for the portal. It proved unlocked. Holmes eased the door open, and the first thing I saw was an iron railing. Peering over the sleuth's shoulder, I could see a large room with its floor at a lower level. Now the cynical sound of an engine was quite apparent. This had to be the boiler room of the building, and the door through which we peered opened on a narrow catwalk running its length. I assumed that further on there was a flight of iron stairs leading to the basement level. What captured my eyes was a number of men busily engaged in some process, the purpose of which I could not divine. In the center of the sizable area was a table, much like that of a draftsman, and seated by it, on a high stool, was a tall man of advanced years. He was peering, with a hand glass, at a gleaming object that I estimated was 4 feet in length and at least 2.5 feet wide. The basement chamber was brightly lit, and the tablet, for such it was, glistened. Its reflected light was that which, through the centuries, had driven men to prodigious efforts and to deeds that promote a shudder. It was the yellow gleam of gold that had fired the furnaces of greed throughout history. But the tablet, whose worth in rare metal must have been enormous, seemed of no concern to the man at the table. He was studying the inscriptions that covered it, and referring to a number of photographs spread out on the table, along with several lithographs. "Memory Max," whispered Holmes. Possibly it was his name that led me down the wrong trail. I recalled his fame as one of those rare photographic memory types, and did not consider relevant that he was also a master forger. Holmes's words would not have been audible 5 feet from where we were standing. Perhaps it was a subconscious recognition of the fact that his name had been used that caused the man at the table in the basement to suddenly raise his head, and then, to my horror, he turned and was looking straight at us. The light of the large room penetrated through the half-open door that was our observation point, sorry, post, and I saw Memory Max suddenly spring to his feet in alarm, his mouth opening to sound a warning. Holmes closed the door quickly, seizing me by the arm and propelling me back along the corridor that we had traversed. "We were spotted, Watson. Worse luck. But all is not lost. Let us strategically make ourselves known of our own volition." We were rushing towards the front of the building. Then it dawned on me what Holmes intended to do. "Good Lord! You are not just going to brazenly burst in on Chu, are you? Let us take to our heels, Holmes. We are outnumbered and surrounded, old fellow. When all is lost, attack." A theory that you used quite effectively in your adventure with Luchan, if you will recall. Holmes had me there. I had blundered in on those Chinese lawyer and created enough surprise and consternation to bluff myself out of a messy corner. Possibly it would work again, though I sensed that Holmes was motivated by another and deeper purpose. We were in a wide hall now that seemed to run the length of the building, and through open doors several men registered on our pell-mell rush past them. I did not take time to note their appearance or nationality. Then we were in the main room of what had to have been a government building. It was 2 stories in height and seemed too imposing for a common jail. But perhaps that was a function assumed by the edifice later in its varied history. It was brightly lit. The tall windows that stretched along the front wall of the building were all cunningly covered by a felt-like material that provided an effective blackout. In direct contrast to the building's abandoned appearance, this place seemed as populated as St. Pancras or Waterloo Station. The whole busy scene was dominated by a huge chair on an upraised section of the door, in which sat the bewhiskered Chu-San-Fu. Well, I thought, he has come as close to a throne as he could, or would, was my second thought, for I was betting on Sherlock Holmes. Our sudden entrance caused a universal cessation of activity, and this core of Chu's criminal conspiracy became as silent as a pharaoh's ancient tomb. "We are delighted to drop in on you again, Cho-San-Fu," said Holmes in his most casual manner, as he advanced towards the several steps leading up to the Chinaman's elevated position. I could do naught but follow and hope that I seemed as unconcerned as my friend did. The Oriental's amber eyes shifted quickly to the door through which we had come. "Where are your cards?" said Chu-San-Fu. There was a flicker of worry in his eyes. "Disposed of, but let's not dwell on that. We had to come face to face. This was your intent all along, so that you could inform me that at the last cast of the dice it was you who had scored the winning point. Well, I am the bearer of sad tidings. It is all over. It's not going to work at all." I am sure that better than half the men in the room didn't understand a word Holmes was saying, and the rest couldn't divine what he was getting at, but such was the conviction of his manner So bright was the triumphant light in his commanding eyes that they remained motionless, transfixed, as was I for that matter. A room populated by the dregs of the underworlds of half a dozen nations was suddenly dominated by two personalities. The rest of us might as well have been pieces of furniture. The resolution of this monstrous matter now rested in the clash of two minds, and every man, Jack, of us knew it. The whole affair was reduced to its basic elements: the evil genius of the crime czar, Chu-San-fu, and the brilliance of my friend Sherlock Holmes. Chu's frail and aged form seemed to have shrunk within the ornamental Chinese robe that he wore, but this was but the reaction of a moment. Then his lips twisted in an evil smile as he realized again his position of strength. You speak bold words, Holmes, for a man in the clutches of his sworn enemy. You know me well enough to realize they are not idle ones. I'll give you high marks, Chu, for not fearing the devil himself. Had I, some time back, outlined your plan and its scope, I would have been laughed out of Whitehall and Scotland Yard as well. The very grandiosity of your scheme lent it a protective cover, for it savoured of the dreams of a madman. There have been other so-called madmen, replied the Oriental, stroking his long white chin whiskers, separated into two strands, as was his custom. Holmes dismissed his words with an imperious wave of his hand. Spare us the recitation of conquerors like Genghis Khan and Napoleon, for that monologue has been oft used. You are making ready for your revelation at the Mosque of Al-Ashar. I had been waiting for it, and rejoiced in the viewing. It came as I knew it would, that sudden stab of fear in the closely guarded eyes of the Oriental. "You know of that?" he asked, and there was a quaver in his voice. "I know of it all. The tomb is now covered, and the entrance to the Valley of the Kings is guarded by an army detachment." Chu-San-fu sprang to his feet instinctively, and then sank back into his imposing chair, steeling himself to recover his control and his dignity. Holmes had often said that the grip of a criminal on his underlings was in large part psychological, and the Chinaman was aware of this as well. "How did you find the tomb?" he asked in a flat tone. "Followed the trail that led you to it," was Holmes's glib response. "No difficulty there, but I will admit that the golden tablets and the great store you placed in them threw me off a bit. However, a remark by my associate Watson brought me back on target." "How much do you actually know?" Chu's query was delivered without any show of emotion. Centuries of Oriental stoicism had taken charge, and his face was now as impassive as a sheet of burnished bronze. I also suspected that for the first time he was actually considering the possibility of defeat. "I don't know," said Holmes, "how long you have nurtured the scheme, nor is it important. You took a series of facts and had the imagination to fuse them into a unity, your plan being to rewrite history. Events dealt you a nice set of cards. First, you had a basic truth. This Nile Valley is the origin of recorded history, and no one will deny it. There are myths and folklore about other civilizations, but they left no mark of their passage, nor monuments of their greatness, that can predate this birthplace of civilization. All that comes from ancient Egypt is marked first in the Book of Man. That was the base of the power pyramid that you strove to create. The next fact you seized upon was the pharaoh, Akhenaten's attempt to establish a utopia, to tell El Amarna, built round a one-god religion, long before Christianity, of course. Possibly that is what sparked the idea in your mind. Chu Sanfu gave no indication, one way or another, but simply gestured for Holmes to continue. I could not decipher his emotions at this point. Many knew or suspected that the sacred sword had been placed in the hands of Captain Spaulding as a safeguard against a fanatical religious uprising, and you decided to secure it as your opening gun. By spreading the word throughout the Mohammedan world that you will appear with the fabled sword, you have drawn an audience of religious leaders. But the sword is only the beginning. It was the decoding of the secret writings by Howard Andrade that opened the road to authenticity. It gave you the cloak to conceal the mark of the charlatan. No one but Andrade has been able to decipher those obscure symbols. You have two of the golden tablets, and it is known that they provide examples of the writings, another fact that you planned to use to your advantage. You planted memory marks with the Englishman, depending on his photographic memory to record the key to Andrade's discovery. Then you spirited Max here with the tablets to remove the original hieroglyphics and forge a new message upon them. Little is known of the pharaoh Akhenaten. The Egyptians attempted to obliterate him from their written history, but you plan to write that history to suit your purpose. In your version, duly forged on the golden tablets, the god Aton, espoused by Akhenaton, will bear a striking resemblance to the Allah of Muhammad. Akhenaten will be recorded as the first prophet, making Muhammad the second, and it will be foretold that the third prophet will come from the east, bearing the sword of he who preceded him. You hope to shake a widespread religion to its core, especially since the golden tablets will be found within the only unrifled tomb of a pharaoh as yet discovered. Your thought was to plant them within the tomb, of course, then have the royal grave covered and its location revealed by you in a vision before the gathering of the Moslems in the mosque. Once the tomb is found and the tablets discovered, the world of archaeology will see to it that Andrade is summoned to translate them, which he will eagerly do, being an unsuspecting tool. The whole fabrication will defy doubt, the tablets being genuine, the tomb as well, and the message of the coming of the third prophet being revealed by an unimpeachable source. Really, the detail of the plot is admirable. However, it won't work now. Chu San Fu had been watching Holmes with unmoving eyes. Several times there had been a restless shifting among his followers, who formed the mute audience for Holmes's recreation, but the Oriental had halted them with a slight gesture of one of his thin and bony hands. Now he replied in a businesslike voice much more chilling to me than an emotional outburst, since it indicated that his first-class brain was still working efficiently and had not given way to panic or frustration. You have blunted my capabilities, Holmes, but not destroyed them. The tomb idea was a major part of my plan, but it can be abandoned. The golden tablets can be discovered in some other manner, though not as convincingly, that I'll admit. Holmes was shaking his head. Come now, you intend to appear as the rumored Messiah. You cannot pass yourself off as anything but Chinese. Mohammedanism spread as far as India, but no further east, so that is one mark against you immediately. Holmes, you are thinking hopefully, not rationally. Prophets spring from faith, not countries. The man who has the sacred sword is the one who will grasp their attention. When I appear and it is verified that I have the authentic sword of Muhammad, then all the various sects of the Islamic religion will be prepared to listen and to accept. I must agree, was Holmes's surprising response. I suspected some time ago that this word was vital to your plans, though I had a dim idea sorry, I had but a dim idea of what you were up to. Therefore, Watson and I were observers the night your men stole it from the Macewood farm. Chu San Fu's restored confidence received a jarring blow from the revelation. Dr. Watson was within the house, that I know, but you were not there. Correction, I was. You used 4 men. They came in over the balcony to the secret room they already knew about. They placed the sword aboard the early freight to London, and from there it was taken to the hold of the Hishouri Kamu to be transported here. Each statement from Holmes was like a body blow to the Oriental. His calmness was a departed thing and his jaw hung loosely. If you knew all that, now it is beginning to dawn, is it not? Do you think I would have let you take that sword and the commanding position that it would bring to you? 2 nights before you raided the Macewood farm, my men performed the same function. They took the real relic and left a duplicate in its place. I believe I was as astonished as the Chinaman. Chu sprang to his feet, crossing to a small table adjacent to his chair, on which was a teak case fully 5 feet long, As he feverishly opened it, I realized why Slim Gilligan and Slippery Stiles had been down country before my arrival. Holmes had been one step ahead of his adversary all along. It was Chu San Fu who had been led by the nose and down the path of deception. Chu was removing a curved weapon, more of a scimitar, I would have said, from the teak case. Its hilt was festooned with shining stones, and it certainly was an impressive object. "Regard the jewels in the handle," suggested Holmes. "That's a nice job, for three deft but dishonest men worked better than 24 hours without stop to create it." "But the jewels are glass, Chu. The Mohammedans will inspect the Mohammedans who will inspect that relic are not without knowledge, and they will label it as spurious in short order." "No!" cried Chu San Fu, and in his voice was the anguish of 1,000 years. "It cannot be!" "Your eyes tell you that it is, but your mind refuses to accept it." Holmes's voice had that whiplash quality that I remembered from other times. His inexorable flow of facts, one hard on the heels of the other, had worn down his adversary, and it was now the man from Baker Street who held the upper hand. "Your dreams of a unified Islam stretching from India to the Atlantic with you as its spiritual leader have, like the murky visions induced by an opium pipe, faded into nothingness. But you recoil and demand proof, so I will give it to you. The night is long upon us, but by now a special edition of the newspaper, Al-Ahram, is on the streets. It has picked up from the Reuters wire a story already well circulated in England and elsewhere. The sacred sword of the Prophet Muhammad was recently stolen from its hiding place, but has been recovered through the efforts of a consulting detective named Sherlock Holmes, and is in the hands of the British government for safekeeping. Right now the story is spreading like wildfire throughout Cairo, and those religious leaders who responded to your siren song are making ready to return to their own lands. The show is over, the theatre is empty, and your drama has failed." There was a nervous tick that evidenced itself on one side of Chu San Fu's mouth, and his eyes had a wild and frantic look about them that sent tingles down the short hairs of the back of my neck. Evidently Holmes noticed it too, for his next words were delivered in a calmer manner. "You know I am right, but you still won't accept it. So be it. Just have one of your men secure a copy of the special edition, and you will have proof." Chu San Fu was breathing deeply, and by what means he signalled his wishes I could not see, but suddenly Holmes and I were seized by the men surrounding us and placed in two chairs. A dirty-looking Lascar proceeded to tie my hands and lash me to the chair, and I noted that one of the giant Manchurians was doing the same thing to Holmes. Another signal from Chu and a ferret-faced half-breed made for the door. By the main entrance was an obese Chinese who swung up a wooden bar that had nestled in two large metal L's, shaped, firmly secured to the stout door. Peering through a peephole, the fat Oriental then unlocked it, and the half-breed slipped through in search of a newspaper as suggested by Holmes. The round guardian of the gate then relocked the door and placed the wooden bar across it again. I judged that it would take an explosion to break that bar, and this thought was of little comfort. When Holmes's story was confirmed, what was our fate to be? Or had Chu already in the back of his mind thrown in the sponge? Possibly he was planning our end with considerable gusto even now. I cast a quick glance in the direction of the crime overlord, but the Chinaman was back in his chair, his chin resting on a knotted fist, staring into space with unseeing eyes, as though in deadly fear of what was to come. The other men in the room were exchanging information in soft tones and in a variety of tongues, and there was an aura of confusion as the whole group waited for the proof that Holmes had promised. It seemed no time at all before there was a nervous tattoo on the other door. The rotund Chinaman swung the bar from its sockets and began to unlock the door when inbred caution caused him to glance through the peephole. Suddenly he twisted the key back to the lock position just as the brass-studded wooden barrier swayed from a thunderous blow that sent the Chinaman reeling. He lunged forward again when there was another tremendous crash through and the door was sprung from its hinges and propelled vertically back into the room, taking its guardian right along with it. Behind the wall of wood was Tiny with his perennial grin and baby face, and a welcome sight he was. Close by the squat colossus was Burlington Bertie with a short billy club swinging from his right hand. Still holding the door, which must have weighed better than 7 stone, Tiny extended his arms, and the fat Chinaman flew to one side, hitting the wall with a resounding crash. Then the door was over Tiny's head and he launched it into the crowd of men in the room like a projectile. There were screams of an object felled, at least 3, possibly more. The two giant Manchurians, unlike the rest of the ruffians, were not frozen in their tracks, for they were bred for conflict. The first one was headed for Tiny in a trice, aiming a massive blow at the boy's head. Tiny's open palm caught the Manchurian's fist in midair, and then his hand closed and there was a crunch of broken bone as Tiny's other hand caught the wrestler under his chin. Suddenly the Oriental strong man was in the air and Tiny swung in a full circle to let go, allowing a tangle of arms and legs to spin through the air before crashing to the floor and taking two other scoundrels with it. The Manchurian's brother had rushed Burlington Bertie, but never reached him, for the Cockney tangled up his legs with an artful foot. As the second bodyguard collided with the floor, Bertie's billy club swung in a short arc, and there was a sound like an axe making contact with a ripe melon, and the second Manchurian was skidding towards the now open door with blood pouring from his mouth. The attack had been so sudden and violent that I could not keep track of events. The room was a frenzy of screams and groans, with some trying to retreat before the onslaught of the lads from London. Chu San Fu had been petrified, like the others, for a moment. Now he was on his feet. The violent look in his eyes was akin to that of a drug-inflamed dervish as he scrambled to the teak box to secure the sword that he had considered his passport to a life of greatness. I was trying to gain my feet, a difficult task when tied to a chair. I noted that Holmes's chair had been tipped over in the melee, and my friend was attempting to bring himself upright on his knees. By now, Chu San Fu had the sword in his hands. I knew that he intended to take the cause of his downfall with him in this final conflict. Out of the corner of my eye I saw one of the felt curtains that shrouded a great window fall of a sudden into a room. There was a crash of glass, then a body was fighting itself clear of the blackout material. Chu was headed for Holmes, the sword swinging in his scrawny arms, when there was a blast of sound. I felt the wind of a high-velocity bullet that flashed past my face. Suddenly the sword in Chu San Fu's hand disappeared, and I realized that the Mauser bullet had caught the weapon at its broadest part and shattered the blade. Chu staggered back, still holding the ornamental hilt. There was a thin sliver of steel left, a mere fragment of the former weapon, but still deadly. The wild-eyed Oriental recognized this fact and made for my hapless friend as I screamed a warning and tried to push myself in his path. Then out from the tangle of blackout material sprang Wakefield Orloff, that deadly steel-rimmed hat in his hand. His quick eyes and uncanny reflexes seized the situation at a glance. One amazing wrist flipped in what seemed almost a casual gesture, and his hat was spinning through the air. The rigid brim caught Chu San Fu on the back of the head, causing a crunching sound. The Oriental's body was toppled by the impact, and he fell right on top of what was left of the counterfeit sword. There was a grunt, then a convulsive shudder, and a sliver of steel slid up through the back of the now late criminal mastermind. This sword had proven to be his passport to another world. The charge of Tiny and Burlington Bertie, augmented by Orloff, was too much for those left standing. The men were fighting each other in their attempts to escape towards the rear of the house, anything to remove themselves from those awesome instruments of vengeance that had descended upon them. Orloff was beside Holmes, his throwing knife severing the bonds that secured the great detective, and a moment later he had me freed as well. Then there came a backup of thoroughly cowed criminals who had run headlong into a police squad that had entered through the rear of the building. I saw more uniforms at the front door and realized that the battle was over and the field was ours. In the confusion of captured criminals, police, and elements of the army, I searched vainly for Shadow Shady, for I had not forgotten the Mauser bullet that had nearly creased me, but had stopped Chu San Fu's fatal mission for that magic moment before Orlov went into action. But Shady had simply disappeared. Not so strange for one who could walk up a wall